Shalom, Israel. I want to continue where I left off at because I want to make sure that there's absolute clarity in what I'm bringing out here regarding Ezekiel and Jeremiah, because I'm still in the book of Ezekiel, the 12th chapter. All right, because there was some very important things that I said, and I just want to make sure that we have the clarity on it, because I had made mention, reading from the book of Josephus, page 218, verse number 2, that Ezekiel had disagreed with him and said that Zedekiah should not see Babylon. And it talked about in the book of Ezekiel, okay, that with the prophecy that was going on regarding Ezekiel, prophesying that Jerusalem was going to go into captivity under the Babylonians, as it tells us in verse 12, and the prince that is among them shall bear upon his shoulder in the twilight, and shall go forth. They shall dig through the wall to carry out thereby. He shall cover his face that he see not the ground with his eyes. And what I found very important was making mention that he should not see the ground with his eyes. What is that talking about? And that can be understood in more clarity when we read the book of Josephus. And I'm going to read it. I'm going to be reading now from page 220 in the book of Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, excuse me. Nebuchadnezzar began to call him a wicked wretch. Who was the wicked wretch? The wicked wretch was Zedekiah, and a covenant breaker, and one that had forgotten his former words when he promised to keep the country for him. Because what's happening now was that Zedekiah was set up by Nebuchadnezzar, okay, to run Jerusalem. Jerusalem was still intact, but the person that was running it was Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the one that set up Zedekiah in Jerusalem. All right? We're besieged. We didn't have the authority to do what it is that we want to do because we have broke the laws, statutes, and commandments. And what happened now is that when Zedekiah had revolted against Nebuchadnezzar, that's when Nebuchadnezzar and his army came up against Jerusalem, besieged it, okay, for 18 months, and finally overthrew Jerusalem. Jerusalem went into the Babylonian captivity for 70 years. And then after that, we went under captivity under the Persians, because the Persians defeated the Babylonians, and the Greeks conquered the Persians, and now we're living under this Greco-Roman Empire, which is the last metal that's talked about in the book of Daniel. So we know now that this is the last hurrah. After this, the Messiah is going to tabernacle with his people. Okay, let me read on. He also reproached him for his ingratitude, that when he had received the kingdom from him, because Nebuchadnezzar had given the kingdom of Jerusalem to Zedekiah from him, who had taken it from Jehoiakim and given it him, he made use the power he gave against him that gave it. But said he, God is great, who hateth that conduct of thine, and have brought thee under us. And we had used these words to Zedekiah. He commanded his sons and his friends to be slain, while Zedekiah and the rest of his captives looked on, and which he put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him, and carried him to Babylon. And these things happened to him as Jeremiah and Ezekiel had foretold to him, that he should be caught and brought before the king of Babylon, and should speak to him face to face, and should see his eyes with his own eyes. And thus far did Jeremiah prophesy, but he was also made blind and brought to Babylon, but did not see it, according to the prophecy of Ezekiel. Okay, so this gives us a better understanding of the prophecy between Jeremiah, okay, and Ezekiel against Zedekiah. I just wanted to make sure that I put the nail in the coffin with that, so that we'll be able to understand it in its entirety. And again, it's important that we understand history. This gives us a better understanding on how to read and understand the scriptures, so that when we go into the New Testament, we see that this is only dealing with the reunification of both northern and southern kingdom. All right. Now I want to go to Hosea 7 and 8. Okay, Hosea 7 and 8, and I want to continue in bringing out clarity in the scriptures to help us to understand this thing a whole lot better. Hosea, the 7th chapter, the 8th verse. It says, Ephraim is referring to northern kingdom. Ephraim, he hath mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned. Now, where it says Ephraim, he hath mixed himself, the word mixed is assimilated. Ephraim had assimilated himself amongst the Gentiles, making him now a Gentile. Because he followed the custom of the Gentiles, this now makes you what you follow. If you follow the heathens, you're a heathen. Ephraim mixed or assimilated himself amongst the Gentiles. That's very, very important, as it tells us in Hosea, the 8th chapter, the 8th verse, where it says Israel. When it's saying Israel here, it's referring to northern kingdom. Northern kingdom or Israel is swallowed up. Now shall they, which is northern kingdom, be among the Gentiles, as a vessel wherein is no pleasure. So now we have Israel being swallowed up. Now shall they be among the Gentiles. Now that they're among the Gentiles, they're following the practices and all of the wicked idolatry practices of them. They're now Gentiles. So it should be no problem with us understanding Paul's ministry. When Paul said, listen, he is not called of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles. The Gentiles is being referred to as, northern kingdom. I'm going to read it again in Hosea 7 and 8. Ephraim, which is Manasseh, Hosea was sent to northern kingdom. Ephraim, he hath mixed or assimilated himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned. All right, now, I've heard brothers break down this whole thing about Ephraim is not a cake, is a cake not turned, making reference that this is talking about Ephraim is going to range from dark skin to light skin. Because, and I've seen the examples of the pancake, and where if you leave a pancake on one side too long, it begins to burn. All right, but everything has to be put in its proper perspective here. When you read Hosea, the 7th chapter, it's not talking about phenotypes. It's not doing that. It's not talking about now, because Ephraim is not following Torah, what's going to happen now is that she's going to now range from dark skin to light skin. That's not what that's talking about. There was already a diversity in color in Israel at that time. That's not the sin. And I'm going to say this again. That wasn't the sin, that was placed upon Ephraim from breaking the laws, statutes, and commandments, that they were going to now range from dark skin to light skin. And I'm not going to get into a big argument about the thing. If brothers want to run that zone, fine. Then, but me personally, that's not what this whole thing is talking about. When it says now that Ephraim is a cake not turned, Ephraim will not return, from her wicked ways. That's all what that means. Ephraim is steadfast in one position where she refused to turn or return back into covenant relationship with the Messiah. That's all what that means. She's like a cake not turned, meaning that she should return, because burning represents affliction. And what's happening at this time now is that Ephraim is starting to depend on her lovers. All of the help in all of these situations that Ephraim is going through, what Ephraim is doing, instead of returning back into covenant relationship with the Messiah, what Ephraim is doing is that she's starting to depend on her lovers. And as the scriptures tell us in Ezekiel the 12th chapter, all of her lovers have left her, they have abandoned her. And after all of this, she won't return in coming back into covenant relationship. That's what that means. Ephraim will not turn or return or come back into covenant relationship with the Messiah. So I'm going to read now again Hosea the 7th chapter, the 8th verse. Ephraim, he hath mixed or assimilated now himself among the people. What people? Also you have to understand too is that Ephraim, because there was still a small remnant of Ephraim, in Jerusalem. Not all of them went under the Assyrian, the Persian captivity here. Now we have to make sure that we understand that too. The Assyrian captivity. Not all of them went there, and they assimilated themselves amongst the other tribes there, the other nations. Because remember, they brought out another nation, the Ethiopians, the Kuta, and all these other people. And what happened now is that Ephraim assimilated themselves amongst those people. So we see a lot of mingling that's going on here. We have to understand the history again, because it's talked about in 2 Corinthians, the 34th chapter, the 9th verse, and it's also talked about in 2 Corinthians, the 35th chapter, the 8th verse, how this assimilation or this mixture came about with Northern Kingdom. All right, I just want to make sure that's understood. Ephraim is a cake not turned. It just simply means that Ephraim won't repent. And that's what this whole thing is about. She would not repent. So she went into exile. She was kicked out of the land, and eventually, she went into this a further land where she said that, listen, you know what, we will follow the Torah there. And if you know about, they're coming over to North, South, and Central America. That's also in 2nd Ezra, the 13th chapter. All right, now I'll bring that out a little bit later on. Now, from there, what I want to do is I want to go to Hosea 8, and I want to read 11 through 12. It says, because Ephraim, which is Northern Kingdom, because Ephraim had made many altars, all right, to sin, altar shall be unto him to sin. What does this mean? Northern Kingdom was not following Torah. All right. Remember, Jeroboam, okay, who was running the Northern Kingdom, what he had did now to keep the nations apart. So at Holy Convocation, so Northern Kingdom wouldn't go to Jerusalem, which was the place where the Messiah placed his name at, because 3 times a year all males must report to Jerusalem. All right, and I'll go into depth with that a little bit later on. But what happened now was that wicked Jeroboam, what he had did now, the Ephraimite, what he did was that he built up altars, all right, in Bethel and in Dan, okay, worshiping the golden calf. All right, Northern Kingdom had a whole lot, and they were following a whole lot of idolatry, following the other nations. And this what led them to be exiled out of the land. I'm going to read it again. Because Ephraim hath made many altars to sin, altars should be unto him to sin. And to go into a little bit more edification on that, let's go to the book of John, the 4th chapter, and I'm going to read the 20th verse. Excuse me, read the 19th verse. The woman said it to him, and I'm going to bring this out later on, that this woman is representing Northern Kingdom. The woman said it to him, Sir, I perceive thou art a prophet. 20th verse. Our fathers, she's referring to Northern Kingdom, our fathers worship in this mountain. And you say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Now, because Mount Gerizim, okay, Bethel and Dan is talked about in 1 Kings, the 11th chapter, the 32nd verse. You can read it on your own, okay? Again, it's 1 Kings, the 11th chapter, the 32nd verse, where we're talking about Mount Gerizim. That's very important because that's where they were worshiping at. And they built up these towers here, or these places of altar. These places of altar to worship was Bethel and Dan. Our fathers worship in this mountain, and you say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. The Messiah said unto her, Woman, which referring to the Northern Kingdom, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet in Jerusalem worship the Father. And he also, the Messiah goes on to elaborate and tells her, ye worship, you know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. All right. So again, we understand where the Messiah says, neither in this mountain nor yet in Jerusalem or Jerusalem, is because Jerusalem is about to be destroyed. Okay, and it was destroyed in 70 AD by Vespasian and Titus. Okay, I'm going to try to read up a little bit more on here. Let's go back to Hosea, the 8th chapter, the 12th verse. It says, I have written to him, which is Northern Kingdom, the great things of my Torah, but they were counted as a strange thing to Northern Kingdom. Northern Kingdom did not want to follow, okay, the laws, statutes, and commandments. The reason why I'm trying to elaborate on this is because, again, it helps us to understand what's going on in Romans, the 9th, 10th, and 11th chapter, so there won't be no mistakes. Cornelius is an Israelite, all right? He was representing Northern Kingdom, all right? And with that, I'm going to say shalom, brothers and sisters, and I'll see you in the next episode.